today to our Replenishing Resilience for 2026, an opportunity to reflect, refocus and restore balance virtual boardroom. It's being facilitated by HR Recruit and Marion Hewitt. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Marion, who will introduce herself shortly. Marion will explore how to replenish your resilience and let go of unhelpful patterns by developing a realistic plan that works for you. If you've got any burning questions during this session, please put them into the chat box facility and we will cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Marion, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Jo. It's great to be here with you. I've been running these sessions at the beginning of the year for quite a few years now, haven't I? A slightly different take each time. And so the focus I've got for this year is about replenishing resilience. My background is a lot of years within HR, different industries, different types of roles, always had an interest in well-being. I've had my own business for over 10 years now, very much focused on working with organisations to take a strategic approach to well-being and have a very particular interest in positive psychology, that science of how we make life better, which is a lot of what I'm going to be drawing on in the session today. And my approach is never about telling you things that you should be doing. There are so many articles and things that have been around the first few weeks of the year with all the lists of things that we should be doing or eating or exercising or ways to do New Year's resolutions that never work anyway. What I'm going to invite you to do is to reflect a bit more on how your world works, reflect a bit more on where you could benefit from more energy resilience, and think about the way that you might approach it. So my thinking and the way I come at it is not from the traditional sense of resilience as being that idea of pushing through or coping better and just having to keep going. And, we're resilient if we can just, we just keep battling on through. It's actually about thinking about how we care for ourselves when the demands are high and our capacity feels stretched. And when we're in roles where we're committed to our jobs, we want to do well, we want to be around for other people, there is a tendency that we put our own needs first, which is a flawed approach ultimately when we look at it a bit more. Just as a kind of safety reminder, this is very much about self-care and well-being. It's not in any way linked to any further interventions. And if you are experiencing symptoms, it is important that you do seek appropriate professional help. So what I'm trying to do in this, whatever we have about 40 minutes now, is to gain a bit of clarity on what drains and replenishes resilience, but very much from our own perspective. Think about the practical tools that will work well for our everyday life, and then start to create that compassionate plan for the year ahead that will work for us. The reality is, in the modern world, we can have sustained brain load stuff coming at us from multiple directions. We can have a lot of things impacting us emotionally. We might be experiencing blurred boundaries around work and other areas of life, or we might be feeling the impact of ongoing uncertainty, whether that's things in our immediate world or whether it's linked to the wider world. And over time, that creates a real depletion in our resources. And that's not because we're weak, it's not because we're not coping, but often it's because we're squeezing out that time for recovery. We're not allowing time for ourselves to feel better. So resilience is not something that we should be demanding of ourselves, expecting us to be resilient all the time. It's something that we can actually cultivate, but through caring for ourselves, through recovery opportunities, and through self-kindness. And when I'm talking about self-care, and I talk about self-care, self-kindness an awful lot in my work, it's making sure we position it and remember it as being, it's not about pampering, it's not about self-indulgent or something we should be doing when we've finished everything else on our to-do list, which in reality we never get to. It should be about our intentional way of supporting our physical, our emotional, and our psychological well-being. And those elements are actually very intertwined and complex in their relationship. So perhaps think about, at the moment when you're under pressure, how do you respond to yourself? Are you responding to yourself with kindness, or are you responding to yourself with judgment and criticism and expectations that you should be able to be doing more? And resilience is often framed as toughness, that ability to endure, to tolerate, to absorb pressure. And whilst there's some logic to that, if we think of sort of the actual definition of resilience in other contexts, it can be unhelpful because actually it means we're less likely to acknowledge our limits. We cannot just keep going. There comes a point when the tank is empty. You can use all sorts of analogies. I use the battery one an awful lot. We go from having a reasonably charged battery to going to the amber zone. And if we just keep going and keep going, we'll reach red. We'll reach that stage of extreme depletion. And when we get to that, we are feeling tired, we can feel a failure, we can feel that the struggle is personal, that we should just be able to manage things, and asking for support can feel hard and perhaps even be viewed as a weakness, reaching out for help. However, what we would benefit from doing is thinking about resilience as something that we want to replenish. It's something we want to restore and something we work to sustain. And it's something that happens alongside all the things that we're trying to do. And sustainable resilience, our research consistently shows, sustainable resilience comes from looking after your well-being. And our well-being is shaped by the everyday approach to how we look after ourselves. It's not about how we manage in times of crisis. And when I'm talking about kindness, self-kindness, self-compassion, then what do we actually mean by this? Because it's not about soft, fluffy approach to caring for ourselves. It's not about, candles and soft music, although it absolutely can be. It's recognizing that we should speak to ourselves with kindness rather than judgment, supporting ourselves in the language rather than criticizing ourselves. It's about recognizing that it's normal to find life difficult sometimes. We're not alone in that. And sometimes we can feel that it's just us. Everybody else is managing. Why is it just me finding it difficult? So recognizing that common humanity in difficulty. And then the mindfulness is about noticing the emotions, being mindful of them, rather than getting over involved and wrapped up in the emotion itself, sort of creating a noticing and a distance from that emotion. So we know that resilience will be built and sustained through that approach of being kinder to yourself. And if we think about at the moment what's currently draining resilience, people talk about burnout and exhaustion, and how we treat ourselves internally very much contributes to that. It's not just about the broader things that are happening in the world. It's not about the physical demands. It can also be about that internal commentary that we've got that is pushing you and judging you, or perhaps minimizing what you're feeling, that pretending that you should be able to do more. And that self-criticism activates the threat response in exactly the same way as a physical threat will. And then when we are stressed, then we actually are not able to think as clearly. We're not able to manage things. And then that reduces resilience further. So think about, what unhelpful habits do you currently adopt? And as I mentioned here, before you actually start berating yourself over habits that you've got, is actually when we start these habits, there usually is a coping strategy. There's something that we do to help us manage a stress. But over time, they can become unhelpful and have a detrimental effect. So that sense of needing to stay busy, having perhaps screen-based rest. So with telesales, we're having a break, but actually we're doom scrolling on social media. We're skipping breaks because we think if we just work through lunch, we'll manage to get this done. Whereas the reality is we will then be more depleted in the afternoon and our overall productivity will be lower. Looking around the boundaries of how we're operating, have we let those become blurred? And I would ask you to sort of challenge yourself in a supportive way. Is there greater ownership you could take in some of these areas than you might be taking? Because I think when we reflect on some of these things, there is often more control available than we might have got into the habit of taking. So a model I'm going to draw on today, because it aligns perfectly with kind of the wider messaging around how we replenish our resilience, is recognizing that resilience is restored through recovery. And we need to build in that recovery. So this argues that stress itself is not the problem. The risk to our overall well-being is when we're not allowing recovery after that stress. So we recognize that working hard work requires effort. It will take resources. It will be draining that battery. It will take concentration. We'll be regulating our emotions. We'll be making decisions. And all of those things will take effort. And those efforts can activate that stress response system. So it's putting all our energy into keeping ourselves safe, keeping us on alert. I'm going to the detailed stress response now, but recognizing that puts us in a hypervigilant state, which is not restful. However, what we want to do is to build in that recovery. So that stops that stress response staying in that hypervigilant state. It allows the brain to reset. It allows us to be recalibrated, if you like. So pushing through is never going to work well. We are continually firing that stress response, which will be depleting our resources until we reach empty. Whereas if we create within that opportunity to recover and reset, then we have got replenished resilience to put effort in again. So if we break this down into the different elements of recovery, and I'm just going to talk through loads of things, put out loads of questions. There is another handout that you can download, link to this, that puts all the questions in to help you reflect later. But now just sort of starting the food for thought through lots of questions. So how do you detach yourself? So as an element of recovery, how do you detach yourself? How do you mentally switch off from work demands? How do you stop yourself from ruminating over things that have happened? How are you avoiding checking emails or replaying conversations? Because that ongoing reliving the day keeps that stress response activated and will prevent that recovery. So what are the things that you could do that can help detach you? You know, what restrictions can you put on your phone that would mean you can't access your emails after a certain point in the evening, for example? And then that element of actual relaxing, that actually calming the system, calming that whole nervous system. So that could be through just gentle movement, through breathing exercises, through quiet time, through being in nature, all those things that will take the body again out of that threat mode. It doesn't have to be something that involves very little movement. For me personally, I know my relaxation usually involves sport, which is using energy, but because I find it relaxing, I get involved in it. Actually, it gives the detachment, it gives the relaxation, and it will replenish my resources from a resilience perspective. But people that are high in self-criticism, when you're not practicing that self-kindness, can often struggle to relax. And if you're not practicing that self-kindness, we can often have guilt associated with it. A few years ago, my sister-in-law, in a rather tongue-in-cheek way, bought me a book called The Art of Doing Nothing, because I'm kind of notorious for not being able to relax. But actually, it's finding the things that are relaxing for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing nothing. And then mastery. This is about when we can engage in things that absorb us and have our interest and attention, but are not work-related. So it's learning or doing just because we want to. So creative hobbies, trying a new skill, physical activities, sports that are done. So it builds a sense of competence and autonomy. So we're doing it out of choice. And that in itself will help in that reset and recovery. And the control, how we can control how our time is spent during non-work time. Now, again, I don't know the different worlds you live in. Some of us will have more or less control over that than others. Some of us have more or less different demands from different areas of life. But actually, we can possibly still take greater ownership for how some of that time is spent than we might be. Are we always putting everybody else first, to the detriment of our own well-being? And having some level of control over our out of work time will definitely promote recovery, enable that reset and replenish that resistance. So things in here, the self-kindness acts, are about things like saying no, putting in boundaries, prioritizing your needs, choosing rest without guilt. So thinking about the different things that you might be exploring there. So hopefully food for thought. What will our plan look like for 2026? And remember, this is about a plan that works for you. Nobody else can create your plan. Nobody else understands your world as well as you do. And we can get caught up in all the publicity and the ideas and the life hacks that we see out there. But actually, they may work for some people, and some of them may work for you. They can be ideas you can draw on. But actually, what we have to really work on is, what's the plan that will work best for me? So what are the things that will activate the self-compassion, will help me demonstrate kindness? All the things that put me into that recovery element that calms the nervous system to replenish my resilience, recharge that battery so I can then put the effort in again. And I don't just mean effort into work at all. I mean, it's so that we've got the energy and the motivation, and we want to do all the things that we enjoy doing, that make life fun and good. And self-kindness is something that we may often have to cultivate. We may have to practice. It's something that if we've got in the habit of being harsher to ourselves, then we do need to be more mindful of how we're talking to ourselves. And a reminder that when we're looking at the things that we might do, this isn't about making massive changes. It's about identifying what will work for you. So I've got a simple process to think about in this way. And it's around noticing, nurturing, and normalizing. So the noticing is about, how do I get in my own way? And this is about gaining awareness without putting judgment in there. So before we start criticizing ourselves for the things that we're viewing as failures, they're not. So we want to be noticing from an objective learning perspective. And when we've got into unhelpful habits, they're not failures. They are protective responses that we developed that once helped us, but actually that over time they've not been. So how do you get in your own way? What do you notice about that? Often that is the thought barriers as much as the practical ones. So you may be, sitting there thinking, she has no idea what my life's like. How can I possibly be doing any of this? And I don't know what your life's like. I'm not pretending that. What we have to step back and reflect on is that we all have the same allocation of time. And actually, every decision we make to use time in one way is ultimately a decision not to use it in another way. So are we consciously choosing how we spend our time? Have we got into habits of using it in a way that's not always helpful? Are we constantly putting other people first and being constantly available for them, but then we're there not in a fully present way, not in the way we want to show up? Whereas if we notice that, if we took a bit of time to replenish our resources, then actually we could show up in a way that we want to be for the people that we care about. So notice the thoughts going through your head: lack of time, putting others first, not knowing what to do, overload of advice, etc., and see what information you gain. Or perhaps, this is one for me, setting expectations that assume unlimited energy. You create a list of things that you're never actually going to achieve. And actually, you just keep going until exhaustion hits, rather than actually setting yourself up with reasonable expectations, setting yourself up for success. And then in terms of noticing, what are your early signs that your resources are becoming depleted? Your resilience is low. Is it tiredness? Is it you start getting impatient with those around you? Do you notice your motivation dropping? Do you become disengaged with things? I can see people nodding, all sorts of those. And I think one of the things with all of this is when we become overwhelmed, our resilience becomes low, we're running low. Actually, we end up being not the person we want to be with the people that ultimately are the most important people in our world. So actually, how we can make some of these changes. So the information we've got here, these signals, these signs, is information. And then that gives us choice. That gives us choice as the foundation of change. So perhaps think about different areas where a habit or pattern that gets in your way. And these are just different areas we might think about. I'm not covering them in detail. Most of them are topics more than their own right. But, sleep, how do you prioritize high quality, sufficient sleep? We tend to only even notice our sleep when we're short of it and we notice the lack of it. Whereas if we would be able to proactively make sure that we have sufficient sleep, and not just a sufficient sleep, but good quality sleep. How are we setting ourselves up for a good night's sleep? How are we making sure the environment's cool enough and dark enough? How are we having wind down time before we go to sleep? Because sleep is vital for replenishment. Parts of our brain are more active when we're asleep than when we're awake. Thinking about your diet, this isn't about any major wholesale changes to what you eat, but what habits do you get into that help you eat well or not? Do you plan meals and have a weekly shot so you've got stuff, or do you get into the habit of dashing into a shop on the way home when you're tired and run out of energy, and the easiest option is to buy something that's not ideal for you health-wise? So just think of what information have you got in these areas that can help you. Then that area of nurturing. What would actually support me? How can I show myself care? So once we've noticed what drains us, the next step is nurturing us, identifying what will genuinely help us. And this is different from what we think we should do. This is about creating our own plan. So things that will support our energy rather than draining it, that will fit into our actual life, not our idealized version of it. So, we tend to make plans based on thinking everything will change and it will be a day when we haven't got stresses and other things happening. So actually, we need to create a plan that will work in the real world that we live in. So it's about having small, realistic, manageable changes. And actually, research also shows that these are more sustainable, these small, repeatable actions, than big plans. And if you read the work of James Clear, Atomic Habits, very well known, but one of the quotes from that you often see put out there is that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And the systems are the habits, the things that we regularly do. So focus on habits, not motivation, because motivation will fluctuate. So we need to have habits in place. That means these things become just what we do. They're not something we have to plan or negotiate or have to feel in the right place for. It's just what we do. So, what would support you? What are the barriers that are getting in the way of you being able to do that? So identify what's the minimum viable self-care, the smallest version of care that you can do that will help you on a tired day. So in work, it might be making sure that you're allowing a pause between meetings. You're not doing back-to-back online meetings. You're closing the day with a very specific transition, the thing that used to be the commute we would have that sort of disappeared in an online world. In sort of outside work, how are you putting limits around family demands in a kind way? Friends, are you choosing connections and time with people that energize you rather than those that you're meeting out of obligation? Life admin, just ticking one small task rather than thinking you can sort everything out. And hobbies, just small moments of enjoyment without any pressure to do anything. So what can you actually nurture? What's one small action that you feel would genuinely support you in the area of life that you're feeling stressed? Three areas, multiple areas for you to think about. Yeah. And when we're trying to create habits and changes, we know that it's about repetition that works. And we want to make sure that we are making it realistic and manageable on days that when it's difficult. You know, motivation is not often, but often we still want to do things. But actually, if it doesn't work, it's usually showing actually the habit is either too big, or it doesn't work well in our life, or it competes with other things that we need to do. So this is a simple model that you'll see in various different ways, written in different things, for how you create a habit. So the cue, the action, and the reward. So the cue, something that prompts the behavior, make it obvious. Attach it to something that's already in your routine, make it so that it's instinctive. And actually it may be as simple as having a reminder coming up on your phone with an alarm to tell you to do something. Stand up, stretch, move around every couple of hours at work. Just have it there until you just do it without thinking. If you want to go and do some exercise on the way home, but if you go home, you'll get sidetracked. Actually, just have your kit in the car and go automatically on the way home. So you don't have time to talk yourself out of it. You just do it. And then when you feel home, you've done it, you feel better. So the action is the behavior itself. Make it something that is realistic and easy. And then the reward is actually that sense of relief and the benefit you will achieve from having done that. So that cue, action, reward, and just think of a few areas. Small steps are essential. Big changes will fail. Big changes rely on high energy and ideal conditions and consistency. And then life happens and we rarely experience that. So small actions repeated create meaningful change. So one cycle of deep breathing rather than a mindfulness session. Standing up and stretching rather than being able to do a full workout. Just noting down a sentence at the end of the day rather than full journaling. So just thinking about what that might mean. And then over time, these become normalized. Over time, these cues will just trigger the behavior automatically. Resistance reduces and we just do it as part of everyday life. And if you think of some of the things that you do now, they were things that weren't habits before, but they have become them. So different areas that we might be looking to normalize things, recognizing that fluctuation, inconsistency are part of who we are. And when we don't manage to do it, it's not something that we should then be criticizing ourselves when life gets in the way, but actually just recognize that it wasn't going to happen today, or that we are human, and make sure that we build it in. That the challenge is when we keep, which is when it means that we haven't got a clear enough cue. If there's somehow there's always a reason that we use to override why we're going to do something. So it's why the cue needs to be a very clear one that we will follow. So how are we going to set ourselves up for success? I've been sharing loads of different thoughts with you. Hopefully some of them have resonated and given you some ideas. And when we're working out what we're going to do, we want to make sure that the actions we identify are considered. What specific actions are you going to take? When and how often? Are they realistic and achievable in your world? Set yourself up for success. How will you feel after taking them? What will be the reward? And sometimes the reward will just be immediate. So, if you go for a walk at lunchtime, you will feel better when you come back. Or it may be something that's further away, but by those small steps, you're working towards it. And it has to have an element of, it may not be something that you would be jumping up and down to doing, but you want it to be something that's not going to be a real slog, or something that you really like, because you really are going to struggle to stick with it. So your plan is your plan. It's going to be personalized, and it's about how we are building that recovery to replenish that resilience. So the notice bit. So a few additional questions for you to think about here. Where do I feel most depleted now? So these are actually in the handout you can get. What patterns or habits have I recognized during the session? Where do I tend to get in my own way? And particularly with that one, come at this with a place of kindness. Recognize you're doing your best that you can. Don't be beating yourself up for the things that you don't think you're doing as well as you could. Which areas are most affected? Work, home, family, friends, hobbies. So remember, this bit is about noticing. It's not judgment. Just a couple of one or two insights. And then the nurture, what would genuinely support me? What do I need more of to feel replenished? Is it rest? Is it boundaries? Is it movement? Is it connection? Is it quiet? What's helped you in the past that you might have drifted away from? What feels realistic now, not in an ideal day or an ideal week? So choose one small supportive habit. As I've said a few times, the version that you could do on a tough day. So one thing I will do is a supportive habit I will develop is, and just create a couple of ideas. And then to normalize what might get in the way of this plan. When life intervenes, what will I say to myself? I.e., speak to yourself with kindness. How can I respond to myself with kindness? So a phrase that you might want to create that you can use when things don't go to plan, acknowledging you're doing the best that you can. One of the phrases I use in an awful lot of training I do is that everybody does the best they can with the resources they have available. And you will be on every day doing the best that you can. What we are aiming to do through this session and through helping you to think about is actually increasing those resources. So we do have more resources to draw on. So at the start of the session, I was talking about resilience as something that we want to replenish. It's not something that we demand of ourselves all the time. And it's not about having a perfect plan. It's about something that works for you. So don't make replenishing resilience another job on your list. Make it something that you want to take part in, you want to develop from a place of care and kindness. And I'm just going to show the last slide, which is just touch a bit more about the work I do, and then I'll be interested in getting some thoughts, having some discussion in the time that we have left. So a lot of the work I do is with organisations, helping them take a more strategic approach to their well-being, recognising that workplace and employee well-being are different things, and how we can create good workplaces. Unleashing You covers a range of modules that are all drawing on positive psychology for both individual and organisational performance, engagement and well-being. Do a lot of mental health first aid and wider mental health training, as well as a wide range of webinars and training sessions around self-care, resilience, strengths, all sorts of things, all the things that come back to helping people feel better versions of themselves. And as the strapline says, unleashing the power of your people. So let me take that down. See, I've seen a few things go in the chat, although I see some of them are people that have had to drop out. But any thoughts, feel free to put your camera on, feel free to share your thoughts, ask questions, be interested in what's resonated with people. I'm sure somebody will talk to me in a minute, or at least put it in the email, in the chat.
I'll talk to you, Marion. It's
Thank
Denise
you.
here. I found it really helpful. Thank you. I think when we talk about habits, I recognise that one of my really bad habits is to self-criticize, and that's definitely something that I want to work on this year. I think it's also fair to say that a lot of us that are in HR do put others before ourselves. That comes naturally because you want to help each other, you want to help your teams, particularly if your business is going through change. So I think it's important to take time for yourself as well. So thank you for reinforcing that message.
Thank you. I mean, those of you that come to sessions, I know I do, it always for me will come from an element of, self-care, and is about self-compassion, that being kind to yourself, rather than trying to set up with, huge expectations that will we just can't do it. We're setting ourselves up to fail, which is going to further impact us. So I think.
If I may, I
Yes,
yeah,
please.
totally reiterate what Denise just said. For me, I guess I want to do too many things too quickly, so overwhelm myself, and therefore leads me to a feeling of, well, I'm not very good at what I'm doing because I haven't finished or whatever. And I've come across a book just started reading, which is called Intentional, and it's all about the intentionality of us wanting really to do something which allows us to finish. And sometimes we want to start things which are maybe not the right thing for us at this precise moment, or we underestimate the time it will take to do those things. So the book is from Chris Bailey, and for me it helps me a lot. It's how to finish, what one starts, but your intention in wanting to start something have to be the right one from the start. And I think it relates to everything you've just said. So thank you very much.
Yes, and often, yes, it's got to have some intrinsic motivation. There has to be some reason that we want to do it, and it's got to be from ourselves, not somebody else. Jenny, just looking at your comment, any methods to do it, it's just hold a team, each other to account. I think there's a few things here. I mean, sometimes you could do sort of things together in terms of challenges, but doesn't have to be anything big like that. But actually, I've worked with some organisations where we've done things like we've sort of set up a team charter. And some people run away as soon as you hear the word charter. But ultimately, it's an agreement about how we'll work. And that's, given a lot of the challenges in the workplace, that can be really beneficial. So it was things like a joint commitment that no meetings would be scheduled between 12 and 1. That nobody would email each other after 6 o'clock. And they held each other accountable to those behaviours. So that did make a real difference to that. And actually that was with the senior leadership team, which then cascaded the behaviours to the wider organisation. So it had a wider thing. Or you can just do partnership accountability. I mean, just purely by saying something out loud, you actually are much more likely to do it. If you've told somebody you'll do it, you are much more likely to. But also having conversations to help people work through the obstacles and the barriers, because you can be sitting here with clear intentions, really want to do something, and then something happens this afternoon, or you get home and something's happened, and you put it off the list again, and then by tomorrow you've forgotten you were even intending to do it. So it is challenging. I mean, which is where those habits are the key thing, and then not letting yourself have time to hide. An example I have, many people think I'm mad to do this, and it is questionable. I do a spinning class at 7 o'clock in the morning, a couple of days a week. Now, if I had to think about that, I would not go. But I have my alarm set for a time. I have my kit by my bed. I get up, I'm dressed, I'm out the door within moments. I do not give myself time to talk myself out of it. And I know when I come back, I'm set up for the day and I'm more energized than other days of the week. But if, when I go to bed, I'm thinking, oh, do I really want to do that? But actually, because it's a habit and I don't allow myself, and very occasionally, because there's always I could always create a reason why not to go. There's always something I should be doing. But then I remind myself that the reward is I will feel better for the day.
I think it's about building it into a routine as well, isn't it, Marion?
Yeah.
There's a couple of bits and bobs in the chat.
Right, yeah. I've replied to Jenny, I've replied. Yeah. Lunch, yes, so many of them are work through lunch. Yes, and so one of the things I would say with that is the lunchtime thing is don't say I'm going to start taking an hour's lunch, because that's going to be too big an adjustment. But actually just start by saying I'm going to take a 10-minute break and go for a walk around the block, and create the habit, and then gradually build it up, because what you'll very quickly recognize is the benefit from taking that break. I know without fail that if I caught up in something and I decide I'm going to carry on working through, by 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'm fit for nothing, and my overall productivity for the day, not just productivity, but sort of quality of what I'm doing, focus and everything, is lower. Whereas if I go out for a break, for a walk, even if it is only a few minutes, I have a range of routes that I take according to how much time I've got. But I know just making sure I've got that break as a habit. But, that again, you can build some accountability, and going back to the other question, so that you check in with each other that you are actually taking a proper break. Because, some of the habits we get into, they're flawed logic anyway. They don't actually help us. Any other thoughts? So my main aim is to send you away thinking and reflecting, and hopefully put a few actions into place. I think it's nice to see some familiar names in the group, as well as first time we're meeting quite a few of you. So really, and actually, thank you. The first step you've actually taken is by prioritizing it. I know, there's, as with all these online sessions, there are an awful lot more people that signed up than have turned up, and actually you've made the first step by actually turning up. So thank you, and well done for taking that step.
Okay, I'll do the close, Marion.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to say thanks very much for everyone for turning up. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I'll send some correspondence out to everyone that's signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn this afternoon. So if you'd like a copy of Marion's supporting information or a copy of the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event is on Thursday, the 12th of February, and is called Managing Grievances for Effective Outcomes. A link to sign up for this will be included in the email. If anyone is recruiting, we've also got FD Recruit, Exec Recruit and Charity Recruit within the group. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Marion for your time and effort in putting it together. I think everyone would agree there's been lots of participation and food for thought. And thanks very much to everyone for turning up and tuning in.